We first saw him in the pilot of The Next Generation, and he reprised the role of Q countless times over the preceding 14 years. Today, I sit down with John de Lancie.
Now in its 7th year of podcasting, this is Trekzone's Vegas or Bust Tour with your host, Matt Miller.
Well, welcome to a Trekzone conversation, continuing STLV coverage throughout August, and I'm very excited with today's guest. It is, of course, Q himself, Mr. John de Lancie. John, thank you so much for a little bit of your time.
It is, of course, Q, isn't it? Yes, you're quite welcome.
Star Trek. How is
I've heard of it.
This little TV show that you appeared on once or twice.
Right.
What's the journey been like for you?
Well, it's an extraordinary journey. I mean, it's something that most actors don't ever get to experience. And whenever we see each other, we go, how lucky we are. You know, really. So I'm delighted to be involved, and coming to Las Vegas a little bit like, you know, old home week, because we see each other. We haven't seen each other for perhaps a year or so. Also, we see fans that we have seen for 30 years. So we're all growing old together.
Well, you haven't aged a day because you are an omnipotent being. Yes, well,
I look exactly the same on radio as I did 30 years ago.
Well, Star Trek kept you coming back. What's it like to receive that call from your agent and say, Star Trek want to do another episode with Q?
Well, they would call not quite once a year, almost once a year. I think one year I did not do an episode for TNG. And they would say, you know, we have a Q episode, and it's going to be in about, I don't know, a month or 6 weeks, and hopefully he's available.
Who is your favorite captain or commander or lead actor of the show?
Well, I mean, you know, that's sort of a twofold question. The fact of the matter is that it's really what scenes work the best. And the scenes that probably worked the best were between Q and Picard. There was no constraints. There were constraints with Janeway. They just were so concerned that Kate might end up playing it where she became infatuated or I became infatuated. They didn't want any of that, which I think was somewhat of a mistake, but in any case, they didn't want any of it. So you had a little bit of a governor on your accelerator, as it were. With Picard, it wasn't that way. I mean, it was full out.
And you spent a lot of time with Picard as Q, with those multiple episodes through the series. So it really developed into quite a great relationship. What was it like to come back each time when they brought you back for another episode?
Well, there were a lot. That's a question that is sort of more of a fan question, which is to say that you are following a story. I'm not really in that. I was not really in that zone. For me, there were technical issues that had to be dealt with. How many lines? Is the scene a good one? If it's not such a good one, how can I help make it a better one? So it was all in that respect. It wasn't. I did not track. Oh, I'm getting to see Picard again. Wasn't my job. That was your job. Yeah.
Well, then I wanted to just touch on your one-time appearance on DS9.
Yeah.
Ben Sisko hit Q.
Right.
In the boxing ring.
That's right.
Is that the reason Q never returned?
You got it. You go and get hit in the nose and tell me how many times you want to go back into that boxing ring. I remember as a little kid, I went to a camp when I was 10 years old, and we all had to box. And quite literally, I got smacked right smack in the face, and I went, no. This is not a good sport. I do not like this. Not to be done again.
And lastly, John, bringing your son into into Star Trek with you. We were at the Q panel earlier today. So it really was a natural sort of process to get him cast in the show. But working with him, what was it like to work with him on that show? Such a fun episode.
Well, it was perhaps more fun in retrospect or in the retelling than it was. Our job as actors, if you, I don't know if you play any sport or what have you.
I used to dabble as a kid.
Okay. Yeah. If you're in a tennis match, you really are not, your job is not to be concerned about the other player. Your job is to beat the other player. I don't want to say that acting is quite as frontal as that, but there are elements that are not unlike what I just described. But in this case, I'm acting with my son, for which all of my attention was on how's it going for him? Well, that's not quite the power that Q operates from, the character, or even John Lancie operates from as an actor working with somebody else. I'm nice with them, and I don't know, but we're not. It's not about is everything all right for you? And that was the case when I was working with Keegan, because I was really concerned for him. So it was a little bit fraught because of that.
And lastly, John, I know you've been asked this a lot, and you get asked this by fans at conventions. The new Star Trek Picard show. I know that you sort of led off there in the panel, being omnipotent. If they were to write in Q coming back as a special, maybe they sort of bringing back these cameo appearances, would it be something that you would consider?
Of course I consider it. There was somebody who made a very funny, when I was asked would I do the show, and I said, well, I'm supposed to be omnipotent, and this is 30 years later. And they said, no, you see, you are omnipotent. You're still omnipotent. It's just that you've made yourself look older so that Picard doesn't feel so bad about how old he looks. And I'm like, oh my gosh. It was very funny.
Where there's a will, there's a way for any fan.
There we go.
Fantastic, John. Well, thank you very much for having a Trekzone conversation today.
You're quite welcome. Bye-bye.
Get exclusive access to podcast and behind-the-scenes info by becoming a member on Patreon today. Supporting Australia's unofficial home of Star Trek gets even better, with membership starting at just $1 per month. Jump over to patreon.com/TrekZoneOrg.au.